Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is Health Coach and Personal Trainer Val Fiott. Today, we're talking about nutrition, and more specifically, we're talking about dietary fat. In this video, I'm going to talk with you about its purposes in the body, its main functions for the body. We're also going to talk a little bit about how much is generally recommended for someone so that you can figure out if you're getting too much or too little or what kind of changes you need to make. Then we're going to talk a little bit about what are the quality dietary fats that you want to lean more into in your diet, and what are the bad ones that you want to stay away from. So before we get into all of that, I'm going to ask you to please click like so that more people see this video and it does better in the algorithm online. And I'm also going to ask you to click subscribe so that you get more videos like this in the future. I've got one coming every single day, if not more, and I want to make sure you're getting all the best advice for your health and longevity. All right, so all that said, let's go ahead and dive in. Let's talk about what dietary fat really does for the body. Now, it has a lot of different roles. Your body is so dynamic in the way that it utilizes macronutrients, and dietary fat is one of the macronutrients. But I would tell you that the chief responsibilities, its chief functions, are mainly relating to hormone secretion. When you have the right amount and the right quality dietary fat, your hormone levels are going to be better balanced in most cases. And in addition to that, it also provides energy for the body. You often hear that carbs provide energy, which is also true, but dietary fat also plays a role in providing energy to the body. Now, it also does other things too when it comes to cellular function, which of course is one of the most critical components in your whole physiology. Cell function also involves dietary fat. And thermoregulation, keeping your temperatures right for the body as well, is also a big part of that. And now the dietary fats that you consume also do have a lot to do with protecting your organs and also vitamin absorption, which is why when people go too low in their dietary fats, we often see a lot of other problems come from that because some of the vitamins are not going to be well absorbed. So now let's talk about how much dietary fat you should be getting in a day. What's the sweet spot? So you don't get too much, which can, really cause trouble with your gallbladder and create gallstones. We don't want too much, and of course that can lead to obesity as well. And yet we don't want too little to where we start to sacrifice those functions that we just talked about. So what is the sweet spot? Well, this is where things get really controversial. For a long time, traditional science really said then and still says now for the most part, you'd want about 20% of your total calorie intake, up to 35 or even 40% to come from dietary fat. Those are the general guidelines that people like myself came up with in the 90s, where that was tried and true science that no one was really arguing with all that much. Now, these days, we've got the success of the ketogenic diet, which generally has you eating more than twice that amount, usually around 55, 60% or so of your total dietary intake would come from dietary fat. And so that's really different. In keto, you're getting so much more fat because the fat is ultimately replacing the carbohydrate for energy. Whereas in more traditional nutrition science, we're generally relying more on the carbohydrate for daily energy than we are for fat. So it's, obviously both ways have worked really well for a lot of people. We've seen people live to be very great age, have phenomenal longevity and really great quality of life in both ways, and a lot of other strategies in between. So it's not really something for me to say that one is necessarily better than the other. What I would say is that different strategies work for different people. There is a lot of science in support of the more traditional methods of 20 to about 35 or 40%. And again, with keto, we also see some great successes there as well. So this is a little bit of a controversial topic, but what I would say is determining the right strategy for you is really going to boil down a lot to a little bit of trial and error. That's usually what almost everybody needs to do is you try a little bit of one and then try a little bit of the other and see what happens after several weeks or even months, to see what your exercise performance is like, your aerobic threshold, just how you're generally feeling as well. So we can get that kind of feedback. And that's what a good coach generally does is they get that feedback from you. But we also look at a lot of other lifestyle markers as well. There are certain sports, for example, and certain lifestyles and behaviors that would make us lean a little bit more one way than the other when it comes to determining what your ideal dietary fat intake should be each day. So I'll give you a couple of quick examples. Let's say two clients come to me and one of them says he's got a long history of long distance running. He goes for long jogs 3 days a week and he always feels great. Well, that's someone who's going to be better suited by getting a relatively lower, 20 to 35% or so of his total calorie intake from dietary fat, so he can have room in his meal planning for carbs. That's probably going to suit someone like that better because they're doing this long distance kind of work. They're very endurant, and therefore carbohydrates are generally a slightly better gas for that. Now, when you're talking about someone who maybe has had some history of hyperglycemia, and they're not so active and they're not doing endurance activities and they have no interest in getting into endurance activities, and they're only really interested in just a general workout plan that's 30 minutes to an hour or so, a couple of days a week. Okay, in that case, we might want to go ahead and try the higher percentage of dietary fat in their diet and lower carbs, because they can still get the energy they're going to need, but they don't have the kind of endurance needs that the first client had. So again, that's just the beginning of it. There's a whole lot more math and a whole lot more to look at. We certainly have to look at feedback factors like, how do the clients feel? Are they ever getting dizziness or other symptoms? There's a lot to look at, but I would say in general, those are two fairly good examples that you can keep in mind in terms of better understanding where the math begins in terms of figuring out how much dietary fat someone needs. Now, like with any macronutrient, dietary fat is ultimately going to be determined by body weight and by activities like we spoke about, and by body fat percentage. We have to look at what someone's total mass is. We have to look at what percentage of their mass is muscle as opposed or lean tissue as opposed to fat. So now let's talk a little bit about how this relates to obesity. There are a lot of people who have, and you don't see as much of this as you used to, but a lot of people will go very low in their dietary fat intake, and in some cases even cut it out completely, which is extremely bad for you. But they will just say, okay, I'm going to go really low in dietary fat because therefore I'm going to have a lot less calories in my body, and therefore I'm going to lose more weight. And I have a very sad story. I remember my dad told me at one point that he had a friend who was very, very overweight. He cut out all fat for something like a year. And my dad said it really worked because he lost a lot of weight. It really worked. And I said it didn't work though. He might have lost weight, and it's really to be determined as to how much of that was actually fat and not just muscle. Because generally when you're cutting out dietary fat incredibly like that, you're certainly going to lose muscle as well, which in your long term is extremely dangerous. But I would say no matter what, even if all the weight he lost was dietary fat and body fat, and that there was no muscle loss, even if that were the case, that is incredibly bad for him, because all of those purposes, those functions that I listed for you at the beginning of the video, cellular health and vitamin absorption and all these important things, yeah, he didn't get those properly. Without dietary fat and without the right amounts of dietary fat, this poor guy ended up sacrificing. Yeah, he got the weight off. Okay, great. But look at all these other potential health problems that he's causing. And you don't always see these health problems right away. If someone goes off of dietary fat or goes too low for a given period, it's not like these problems necessarily become evident right away. It could take months or even years before they really start to manifest as a symptomatic problem in your body. But rest assured, if you're going a long period of time with vitamin deficiencies and obstruction to cellular function, rest assured that that is incredibly bad for you, and that one way or the other, that is going to catch up with you. So it's important that you're getting the right amount of dietary fat, whichever strategy you end up choosing, whether it is a higher fat strategy like in keto, or if it's a lower fat strategy that's more traditional nutritional science. All right, so at this point, I've got to remind you, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. We're going to move on to a couple more things here, but please also let me know in the comments if you have questions so far, or if there's any other topic that you want me to cover in a future video. Please let me know in the comments. All right, guys? We'll wrap up in a moment, but first, let's talk a little bit about quality of dietary fat. Now, this is where we have to talk at least a little bit about omega-3, and at some point in the near future, I'll do a whole video on just specifically the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. But this is really important because dietary fat, the particularly healthy ones, generally contain more omega-3. Omega-3 is very important, statistically speaking, in terms of combating and preventing disease. And disease of all kinds, too. I'm talking everything from your joint health to your energy levels and your musculoskeletal health to brain health. Omega-3s have a lot of roles in the body, and most people don't get anywhere near enough omega-3 as they do compared to omega-6. That ratio should be almost a 1-to-1 ratio, and most people have like a 1-to-20 or 1-to-40. It's just not even close. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is that when you're trying to determine which dietary fats to take in, I'm going to say lean more into the omega 3s. Unless you're someone who is already really going out of your way to get omega 3s into your body, in which case I doubt you're watching this video, you're probably going to be shy in omega 3s and you're probably going to need more. So, one of the best things you can generally do, and again, I'm talking to the masses here, everybody's going to have different needs, but one of the best things you can generally do is to start leaning more into the fats that are higher in omega 3 content. Now, I'll give you a few examples. So, flax is one of the great ones, totally plant based. In addition to flax, you could look at pretty much any fatty fish. Salmon is usually at the top of that conversation. Tuna as well, and tuna is so great because it's so convenient, so easy to obtain. But salmon, tuna, and basically any fatty fish is going to be high in omega 3 and therefore going to be a good source of fat. Healthy fat, of course, the concern with any kind of fish is the mercury levels, right? There's always that small risk. So I know some people don't want to have quite as much fish, especially if they do have any heavy metal toxicity. That's okay. We've got plenty of other options. So now let's talk about some nuts, for example. Walnuts are a fantastic source. Almonds also are a really good, fantastic source of dietary fat containing a good amount of omega 3. Chia seeds are another really nice thing. I've got clients who sprinkle them onto yogurt or cottage cheese, and that way they're able to get the chia seeds comfortably in with another food that they also enjoy. And another thing on this list that we've got to talk about are eggs, specifically the egg yolks that really provide the high levels of omega 3. They also provide a great number of vitamins and minerals. So I know eggs are a little bit controversial for some, especially people with any kind of history of high LDLs. If you're concerned about LDLs, of course, talk with your doctor or a dietitian or nutritionist, talk in a more personalized level. But for the purposes of this video, I'm certainly going to say that for most people, eggs are a fantastic, one of really the healthiest sources of omega 3s that you can get because you also get so many other great things as well. Now, going back to the world of fish before we finish up, I should also mention that both anchovy and sardines are also high in omega 3. These aren't in the conversation enough, but I do recommend these kind of foods as well. So guys, I hope this video has been helpful. Please make sure you like and subscribe. I want to get more videos like this to you. If you have questions or feedback for me, please let me know in the comments. And I've also put together a 10-question questionnaire for those of you who are on a weight loss plan or who are thinking about beginning a weight loss plan. What I did was I put together the 10 questions that I felt were going to be the most important in figuring out whether your strategies and your methods that you have in mind are going to be really effective for you, or if the efficiency is going to be low, or if the safety profile is going to be low. That's a free download here in the description. Check it out, see how you score, and then of course I can give you my feedback and we can talk a little bit if you'd like in terms of what I think you should do differently. Okay, everybody, I'm looking forward to your health and your wellness success. I'll see you next time.